You've found nightfall murmurs. When day fades into silence, the world begins to whisper. Some stories come as murmurs, some as warnings, but they all come at night. Don't be afraid to listen, but never listen alone. The jangle ripped through the 2:30 a.m. stillness, a sound I viscerally loathed. Late calls, in my experience, were harbingers, never bearers of glad tidings. My eyes flew open into the oppressive dark of the bedroom. A hand, slick with the night's residue, fumbled for the phone's accusing glow on the nightstand. Number withheld. A green smear across the screen, the cool plastic pressed to my ear. 5 words, delivered by a voice utterly foreign, plunged my stomach into freefall. I am here, at the door. Male, deep, placid, too placid. I levered myself upright, the sheets clinging damply. 3 days now since the air conditioner had surrendered to the August swelter, leaving my second-floor apartment downtown a stagnant pool of heat. Solitude was my norm. Visitors at this ungodly hour were not. "Who is this?" The question scraped raw from my throat. "Come to the door," the voice instructed, unhurried. "We need to speak." "It's the dead of night. Identify yourself." "Just answer the door, Elias." He knew my name. A frantic drummer took up residence beneath my ribs. I swung my legs out, the old floorboards groaning a protest beneath my weight. "How do you know my name?" "I know quite a bit," the voice purred. "I know you're standing beside your bed. I know you wear gray shorts, no shirt. I know the apartment is empty but for you." A glacial chill seeped into my marrow. My head whipped around, scanning the windows. Venetian blinds offered fractured privacy, slits of darkness hinting at the world beyond. Could he see in? I retreated instinctively. "What is it you want?" I fought to keep the tremor from my voice. "Open the door, Elias. There's a matter of importance to discuss." "I'm dialing 911. "No." The voice remained unnervingly serene. "No, you won't, because doing so guarantees you never learn what became of Clara." Clara, my sister, vanished 3 years ago. 6 months of fruitless police work before the trail dissolved into cold silence. No trace, no closure. Just an aching void. My hands trembled violently. "What could you possibly know about Clara?" "Everything. Open the door and the story is yours." I moved to the bedroom threshold, squinting down the short, shadowed hallway towards the apartment's main entrance. Its silhouette was faintly limned by the security lights spilling under and around its frame. "How can I be sure you're actually out there?" I challenged. "This isn't some depraved prank." 3 sharp, percussive raps exploded against the wood, making me flinch. Knock. 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 "Does that suffice?" the voice inquired through the phone. My mouth felt like sandpaper. The sound hadn't come through the receiver. It had resonated from the physical door. He was truly outside. Barefoot, I stepped onto the cool hallway floor, the phone a slick, uncertain weight in my palm. "Tell me something about Clara," I demanded. "Now, or the police get the call." "Time depletes, Elias. 30 seconds to open this door or I depart, taking the truth about Clara along with me." "How do I know you aren't fabricating this?" 25 seconds. "Give me proof, something only someone who knew her could know." The day she went missing, a green sundress, sandals, silver. Around her neck, a delicate silver chain, a butterfly pendant, your mother's gift for her 24th birthday. My chest constricted. Every detail was agonizingly accurate. Details never broadcast, never leaked. 20 seconds. I drifted closer to the door, my free hand hovering near the deadbolt's cold metal. 15. If I open this, how do I know you mean no harm? Had harm been my intent, this call would have been unnecessary. 10 seconds. My heart hammered a frantic rhythm against my ribs. Clara's face materialized in my mind's eye. Her laugh, the light in her eyes. 3 years suspended in the agonizing state of not knowing. 5 seconds. With a click that echoed like a gunshot in the stillness, I turned the deadbolt. Time expires, Elias. Your decision? My palm, sweating profusely, closed around the doorknob. A ragged breath drawn, held, then expelled as I pulled the door inward. The hallway yawned, vacant. Hello? I stepped over the threshold, peering left, then right down the dimly lit corridor. Empty. Utterly empty. Behind you, the voice whispered, this time directly in my ear. I spun, the phone tumbling from my grasp to clatter on the floorboards. A man stood silhouetted in my living room, tall, broad in the shoulders, clad in a black suit that whispered of expense. His face was sharp-featured, cleanly shaven. A smile touched his lips, devoid of warmth, failing to ignite his eyes. How did you... My voice trailed off. Fire escape, he stated flatly. Your bedroom window latch is faulty. Negligent, Elias. Highly negligent. I instinctively backed towards the open door. He advanced a single, unhurried step. Don't flee, he advised. You'll want to hear the rest. Stay where you are. His hand dipped inside his suit jacket. I braced, anticipating steel. Instead, he produced a phone. Not a sleek, modern device, but an archaic flip phone. He opened it, thumbed a button. Clara's voice, fractured and weeping, filled the suffocating air. Elias, if you get this. A sob choked her words. I'm sorry, so incredibly sorry. I never wanted any of this. You have to. He snapped the phone shut, silencing her plea. Recorded 2 days after her disappearance, he informed me coolly. Care to hear its conclusion? My legs turned to water. I sagged against the wall. Who are you? Someone acquainted with the true narrative. He slid the device back into his pocket. Someone capable of providing answers. But first, we must address what you are prepared to do to obtain them. What do you mean? Your sister inadvertently discovered something significant. Those implicated could not risk exposure, but they didn't end her life. Elias, she is alive. The room tilted. I slid down the wall, landing heavily on the floor. Where is she? That, he sighed, walking to my couch and settling onto it, crossing one leg elegantly over the other. Is complex. Her captors wield considerable power, possess extensive connections. Extraction will be neither simple nor inexpensive. You're after money? In due course. Initially, however, I require your assistance. A minor favor, one might term it. What sort of favor? He reached into his jacket once more. This time, an envelope emerged. Your position at the bank grants you access to certain sensitive materials. Client ledgers, transaction histories, wire transfer details. My stomach plummeted. I can't provide that. It's illegal. More illegal than unlawful entry into a private dwelling in the depths of the night? That chilling smile reappeared. We all transgress, Elias. The pertinent question is our motivation. Your transgression will be in the service of saving your sister's life. He extended the envelope. I made no move to accept it. How do I know she's truly alive? That recording, it could be years old from before. Consult your phone. I retrieved my phone from the floor where it lay. A new message notification glowed. Unknown sender. I tapped it open. A video file, 10 seconds in duration. Clara, seated in a stark white-walled room. In her hands, today's newspaper, the date clearly visible. She looked exhausted, thinner, haunted, but undeniably alive. She murmured my name, then stated the current date. My hands shook so badly, the phone nearly slipped from my grasp again. Filmed 4 hours ago, the man stated. A live video conference can be arranged, should further proof be necessary. But first, take the envelope. Slowly, unsteadily, I rose. My legs felt like foreign appendages. I crossed the room and accepted the proffered envelope. Inside, a list, names intertwined with account numbers. What precisely do you need? Access these accounts. Compile a comprehensive record of every transaction exceeding $50,000 over the preceding 12 months. Dates, sums, recipient accounts. You have 48 hours. The bank's security protocols, they monitor unusual access patterns. But you manage substantial portfolios. Reviewing transaction histories is routine for you. Prudence will render you invisible. He stood, smoothing his jacket. One final stipulation, he added. Resist any inclination towards cleverness. No digital breadcrumbs. No surreptitious alerts to authorities. Any such attempt, and Clara vanishes anew. This time, irrevocably. He walked to my front door. I watched him go, paralyzed. 48 hours, he reiterated. Await my call for delivery instructions. Oh, and Elias. He paused, turning back. Attend to that window latch. One never knows who might fancy a nocturnal visit. The door clicked shut, sealing me in silence broken only by the frantic thrumming in my chest. I stood rooted in the living room, the envelope a toxic weight in my hand. My phone vibrated. Another text, same unknown source. A different video clip of Clara. A new angle. Tears streamed down her face as she pleaded, voiceless for rescue. The timestamp confirmed it was recorded mere moments ago. I collapsed onto the couch, the envelope crackling in my tightening grip. The list of names and numbers swam before my tear-blurred eyes. Somewhere distant, a siren wailed, a mournful counterpoint to my internal chaos. The defunct air conditioner sputtered once, then fell silent again. Sweat traced cold paths down my spine. Dawn remained 3 hours off. In 48, I would either possess the data this man demanded, or Clara would be lost to me forever. My laptop lid lifted. The bank's secure login portal glowed. The account numbers on the paper seemed to pulse with malevolent energy. Each keystroke felt like a descent, another step taken down a path shrouded in shadow. Yet what alternative existed? The sun began its slow ascent, painting the Chicago skyline in bruised hues. I remained tethered to the machine. Resist any inclination towards cleverness. His words echoed. But banking security was my domain. Subtlety was my craft. Perhaps a trail could be laid, faint enough for only the initiated to perceive. Perhaps Clara could be saved without capitulating fully. Or perhaps my gambit would sign her death warrant. The cursor blinked expectantly. The first account number waited. A deep breath, held like a prayer, then released as my fingers began to type. This was merely the overture. That much I understood. Whatever vortex Clara had stumbled into, whatever illicit current had swept her away, I was now being drawn into its undertow. The man in the immaculate black suit would return. There would be further demands, deeper compromises. But Clara lived. That solitary fact reshaped the entire landscape of my reality. I replayed the video, freezing the frame on her face. Fear was etched there, undeniable, yet beneath it flickered a spark, a resilience that suggested she hadn't surrendered, wherever she was held captive. "I'm coming," I whispered to the pixelated image. "Just hold on, Clara, I'm coming." Account records began to populate the screen, a cascade of numbers, dates, destinations. Somewhere within this digital labyrinth lay the truth, and I would unearth it, regardless of the cost. Morning light filtered through the blinds, striping the room. Another day dawned over the city. Lives resumed their familiar rhythms. Mine had fractured irrevocably at 2:30 a.m., shattered by a phone call. Now, 47 hours remained on the clock. The question loomed, was I willing to embrace criminality to reclaim my sister? The answer, I acknowledged with grim certainty, had never truly been in doubt. I initiated the download. This was my new existence. May God grant me mercy. The scent clung, acrid paint overlaid with the sharp tang of industrial cleaner, the moment Elias crossed the threshold. Vestiges of a hasty departure, the landlord had mumbled. Immaculate surfaces belied an intangible weight pressing down, a stillness that felt less like peace and more like suspension. He dismissed the prickling on his skin as simple jitters, the static cling of anticipation. Weeks he'd dreamt of this blank slate, this unwritten chapter. No spectral moodiness would mar the beginning. Silence reigned that first night. Cardboard monoliths disgorged their contents. A solitary meal was consumed. Sleep came swiftly. Morning light, however, revealed imperfections. The hallway looking glass, a tall rectangle dominating the narrow passage, bore a constellation of smudges, definite handprints marring its surface, an oversight by the cleaners surely. Elias armed himself with spray and cloth, erasing every trace until the glass gleamed, flawless. Yet an hour later, phantom impressions ghosted the surface anew. He traced one, a faint, oily residue. Another vigorous cleaning preceded his exit into the city's grey morning. Later, en route to the bathroom, a flicker in the periphery drew his gaze to the mirror. His own form, naturally, yet something discorded. A turn to the left, the mirrored Elias hesitated, a beat behind the reel. Closer he stepped, pulse accelerating into a nervous tattoo against his ribs. A tentative wave. The reflection mirrored the gesture. Yes, but with an infinitesimal delay, a visual stutter. Fatigue, he rationalized, shaking his head to clear it. The glass showed his own anxious frown reflected perfectly. He shrugged, the unease momentarily quelled, and proceeded down the hall. Daily, sometimes twice, Elias waged war on the prints. They materialized relentlessly, never in the same configuration. By day 3, a test seemed necessary. He polished the glass to brilliance, retreated, then instantly pivoted back. Nothing. Hours crept by. He checked again. There they were, a fresh scattering of palm marks and finger trails. A cold ripple spread across his skin. Perhaps he'd brushed against it unconsciously. His own hands. But no memory supported this. No recollection of contact. Panic coiled low in his gut. Drowsing on the sofa later, movie sounds dissolving into a low hum. A whisper snagged his attention. Faint, indistinct, like his name spoken through water. Elias muted the television. Silence amplified the thrumming in his ears. His gaze found the mirror, a dark rectangle brooding at the end of the unlit hall. A strange magnetism pulled him forward, reluctant steps on tense legs, throat tightening. Close up, the glass offered only his own reflection, taut with nerves but obediently tracking his every shift. A shaky exhalation fogged the surface. He retreated, flushing with embarrassment at his own jumpiness. From then on, Elias watched the timing. Sometimes synchronicity was flawless. Other times, a subtle drag, a fractional mismatch in rhythm haunted the movements. Nothing overt, just a peripheral wrongness that raised the hairs on his neck. He'd blink rapidly, rub tired eyes, blame the low wattage bulbs or shadows playing tricks. Yet the conviction grew, insidious and chilling. His reflection possessed its own cadence. Restlessness drove him from bed one night, into the hall where streetlight cast oblique patterns. The mirror waited, silvered and remote. Smudges patterned its face. Open palms pressed flat against the cold plane. Instinct screamed to clean them, but he resisted, leaving them as silent witnesses. He drew a deep breath, turned, and the whisper coiled around him, intimate and chilling, impossible to place. From the glass, from within his own skull. "Why did you come back?" His heart slammed against his ribs. He spun back. The reflection was still, mostly. Except, wasn't its head tilted, just slightly, leaning forward in a way his own body wasn't? Air hitched in his throat. Questions formed but died unspoken. He retreated blindly to his room, slamming the door, bathing the space in artificial light until dawn. Morning found him before the mirror again, cheeks burning with self-recrimination. He touched the cool glass. His reflection mimicked the action, but that sliver of delay persisted, undeniable. Stay calm. Then, his focus shifted. Behind the mirrored Elias, something unfamiliar hovered. A small table, crowned with a lamp he did not own. He scanned the actual hallway over his shoulder. Bare walls, empty space. Yet the reflection held the impossible furniture. Pulse hammering, he leaned closer. The mirrored image advanced in tandem. Yet the phantom lamp sharpened, perched on a console alien to his apartment. Work became a blur of distraction, his stomach a knot of anxiety. Fidgeting, restless. Ignore the mirror, rip it down. The thoughts warred with a compulsive need to understand. That evening, he tried his phone's flashlight, bathing the glass in stark white, searching for optical tricks. Nothing, save the ever-present smears he haphazardly placed like frantic Goya-esque handprints. Days bled together. Sanity felt thin, fraying. He called Leo, admitting only to unease, poor sleep. The mirror remained his secret shame. Leo offered company, beer, normalcy. Elias refused, driven by an inexplicable urge to face this alone. After the call, the hallway beckoned. He stood before the glass, his reflection a mask of tension. Then, a flicker in the mirrored eyes, a shift in focus, an intensity that wasn't his own. Sweat slicked his palm. Behind his double, in that impossible reflected space, a door stood ajar, revealing a glimpse of a room, a sofa, upholstery unfamiliar, that had no counterpart in his reality. Shivers traced his spine. He blinked, the vision held. Backing away, breath ragged, he sought refuge in his bedroom, pacing, heart frantic. Why did you come back? The question echoed, nonsensical. He'd never been here before signing the lease. Come back. Where? His mind raced, then stalled, overwhelmed. Dampness beaded on his forehead, the sharp scent of his own fear rising. He threw open the window, gulping cool air, anchoring himself to the distant city symphony of tires on wet asphalt. Sleep offered no escape, fractured by imagined tappings within the walls. Dawn found him again before the mirror, heart galloping. He broke the silence. Is someone there? The words hung heavy in the stillness. His reflection mouthed the question, the delay now a familiar, nauseating beat. Leaning closer, he whispered, "What do you want?" The mirrored lips moved, emitting a faint, dry rasp, like autumn leaves skittering across pavement, utterly unintelligible. A prickling crawled up his neck. His arms erupted in gooseflesh, fists clenched against the tremor in his hands. He fetched tape, securing the mirror's edges, seeking a rational explanation. Looseness, vibration, but it was fixed solid. Flooding the hall with light banished no shadows, altered nothing. The anomaly remained. Avoidance became his strategy. Hurried steps past the hallway, averted eyes, convoluted paths through his own apartment. Yet the mirror's presence remained palpable, a silent weight. And the prints, morning, evening, midday, they persisted, reappearing at varying heights, sometimes smeared as if by a sliding hand. Each discovery tightened the knot in his stomach. Cleaning them felt futile, a ritual of despair. The tension finally snapped. One evening, steeling himself, Elias stood before the glass, forcing his gaze onto his double. He moved with deliberate slowness, arm raised, lowered, head turned. The reflection mimicked, always that heartbeat behind. Pulse hammered at his temples. Then, the impossible. While Elias stood motionless, arms slack, the mirrored figure lifted its left hand, touching its own face. Ice flooded his veins. His mouth turned to dust. The reflection, autonomous now, stroked its chin thoughtfully. It shifted, revealing again the phantom room beyond. The lamp, the alien sofa. His knees threatened to fold. He stumbled back. The reflection seemed to advance, pressing closer to the glass plane, defying physics and sanity. Ragged breaths tore from his lungs. "Who are you?" The question cracked, fragile in the charged air. The reflection's lips moved silently, its gaze locked onto his, unwavering. No sound came, only a sibilant whisper, like escaping steam. Unbearable. He snatched a throw blanket, flinging it over the mirror, muffling its gaze. Heart hammering, arms stiff, he tucked the fabric tight against the frame. Oblivion, concealment. Sleep was marginally less troubled that night, buoyed by the illusion of control. But morning light revealed the blanket pooled on the floorboards. Had he sleepwalked? Unlikely. Anxiety coiled anew. The mirror, exposed, was freshly besieged by prints, palms pressed urgently across its entire surface. A low curse escaped him. Ripping the thing from the wall flickered through his mind. Its size, the potential damage, a deeper fear of what might lie behind it, all gave him pause. He fled outdoors, seeking refuge in the mundane. Overcast sky wept a fine drizzle. The air smelled of damp pavement. Passing cars, hurried pedestrians, temporary solace. But behind closed eyelids, the asynchronous reflection danced. Returning, he hesitated at his own door, gathering courage. Inside, a chill permeated the air, colder than before. A draft teased from the windows he'd secured. The hallway light stuttered. The blanket lay discarded again. He retrieved it, folded it away. Covering the mirror was futile. Acceptance, cold and sharp, settled in. He faced the glass, breath unsteady. "All right," he breathed. "I'm here." The reflection mirrored his stance, calm, but for the persistent lag. The phantom room reappeared. Lamp, sofa, and behind the sofa, a shadow stirred, an indistinct form gliding just out of view. Heat bloomed on Elias's skin, sweat prickled, he blinked fiercely. The scene held, no dream. The shadow melted away. Then the reflection tilted its head, listening intently to something unseen. Elias stood frozen, thoughts scattering like startled birds. Terror, stark and visceral, constricted his throat, leaving a bitter taste. The whisper returned, impossibly close, brushing his ear. "Why did you come back?" His gaze snapped to the reflected mouth, motionless. The voice originated nearer than the glass, personal, inexplicable. His breath shuddered, an answer hovered, unformed. The reflection watched, eyes intense. And then, a new detail surfaced. A thin, red scratch beneath the reflection's jaw. A mark Elias himself did not bear. His fingers traced his own smooth skin. But in the mirror, the scratch remained. Raw, recent. Nausea surged. He stepped closer, hand raised tentatively. Smooth skin met smooth skin in the reflection, yet the scratch persisted, etched onto the mirrored face. He scrubbed at the glass. No smear, no distortion. Only cold, unyielding glass, and the phantom wound. His hands trembled. Escape screamed through his mind. The reflection drew nearer, its face nearly flush with the glass. Mirrored lips parted. A slow exhalation seemed to emanate from Iku, the mirror itself. Elias realized he'd been holding his breath. He gasped, heart seizing. The tension stretched thin, unbearable. "What do you want from me?" The desperate cry echoed down the vacant hall. The reflection's mouth worked, producing only that dry, wordless rasp. Nerves screamed. Its eyes, locked on his, seemed subtly misaligned, canted slightly, as if peering around him. Waiting. For what? He stumbled back, tripping. The reflection surged forward, pressing its palms flat against the inner surface of the glass, perfectly aligning with two of the ghostly prints. Blood roared in his ears. He squeezed his eyes shut, seeking momentary darkness, but was compelled to look again. The reflection stood passive now, mimicking his posture, but the memory of its independent movement burned. Retreating, Elias dragged a chair from the living room, planting it directly before the mirror. He sat, Vigil declared, heart a frantic drum. He would watch, he would see. Minutes stretched into an hour. His back ached, eyes stung, eyelids drooped. Then, just as resolve wavered, light bloomed within the mirrored room. A lamp switched on. His reflection remained still. A presence, unseen, was felt. Muscles clenched, a sharp intake of breath. The whisper returned, clearer now, insistent. "Why did you come back?" Adrenaline surged. Elias leapt up, hands gripping the mirror frame, face inches from the glass, his own breath fogging the surface. "I never lived here before," he yelled, desperation overriding fear. The reflection's eyes blazed, and then it winked out. Gone. The mirror showed only the empty hallway, stark and ordinary. No Elias, no phantom room, just glass reflecting plaster. He staggered back, body trembling violently, limbs tingling, sweat chilling his back. Seconds later, with a liquid shimmer, his reflection reappeared. It stared back, the scratch still livid beneath its jaw, the timing still unnervingly off. Too much. He seized a towel, threw it over the glass, and fled to the bedroom, locking the door behind him. Mind racing, body leaden, head pounding, he collapsed onto the bed, pressing palms to his eyes, fighting for breath. The whispers ceased, but the question reverberated, unanswered. Whether Elias remains tethered to this place is uncertain. Each dawn greets him with the expectation of fresh handprints, an expectation invariably met. The glass blooms anew. Each night, the susurrus returns, in the hallway perhaps, or solely within the echo chamber of his mind, demanding to know why he returned. He possesses no answer, no key to this unnerving riddle. The mirror, he knows with chilling certainty, is a breach. It reflects dimensions not his own. It shows him, yet not him. A disquieting sense settles, a feeling of being stranded on the wrong side of the looking glass. Or is it, terrifyingly, the right side? Clarity eludes him. Only the persistence of the phenomenon remains, the inescapable confrontation with a doppelganger he cannot comprehend, trapped in a place that may not want him gone, but returned. The memory remains indelible. The first instance those footfalls echoed down the corridor. My second night swallowed by the old edifice, a day consumed by the Sisyphean task of unpacking, wresting order from chaos. Exhaustion had settled deep in my bones. Tranquility was all I craved. Locals had whispered cautionary tales, anecdotes of inexplicable happenings within these walls, but I'd waved them off. The grumblings of ancient plumbing, perhaps, or the sigh of wind through unseen fissures. Yet when that deliberate tread materialized outside my door, slow and purposeful, a primal current prickled across my skin. Instinct propelled me from the worn armchair, ear pressed flush against the cool wood. The hallway fell silent once more, the steps dissolving into nothingness, but an unsettling residue lingered. Not even 2 full days nested here, and already my nerves frayed like old rope. My mind is a construct of logic, buttressed by fact, resistant to the siren call of the paranormal. That initial night I strained to classify the sound, a fellow resident surely. Except the floor housed only one other soul, and Elias, my neighbor, was indisputably absent. He'd mentioned a week-long sojourn out of town just the day prior. This inconvenient truth snagged at my rationalizations. A burr I tried to ignore. Sleep, I decided, was the only sensible recourse. The building itself possessed a certain dilapidated grandeur, floors that protested every step with arthritic groans, corridors papered in patterns faded like forgotten memories. My own apartment, surprisingly vast, boasted high ceilings and windows that drank in the meager city light. Here and there, paint surrendered in brittle flakes, and curious stains bloomed on the plaster, hieroglyphs from tenants long departed. I averted my gaze from these imperfections. The affordable rent was the lodestar guiding my tolerance. Night the third, unspooled stranger harmonies. Midnight approached. Ensconced in the living room's dim glow, navigating the television's flickering offerings, a sharp concussion reverberated from directly overhead. Impossible. The unit above mine was, to my knowledge, a vacant shell. I silenced the TV's chatter, listening intently. Another impact, followed by a grating drag, the unmistakable sound of heavy furniture being laboriously shifted. A vice tightened around my chest. Perhaps maintenance, I offered myself, wrestling at the equipment. But the hour argued against it. Midnight felt too deep, too still for sanctioned work. I rose, drifting toward the ceiling fixture, attempting to triangulate the disturbance. The scraping intensified for a heartbeat, raw and abrasive, then ceased abruptly. A glacial chill traced my spine. I stood frozen, gaze locked on the plaster expanse above, anticipating the next sonic assault. Silence answered. My pulse hammered a frantic rhythm against my ribs. My palms grew slick. There's an intuition, a visceral klaxon that blares when the world tilts off axis. It screamed within me then, yet I remained inert, sinking back into the armchair, willing oblivion to claim me. In the ensuing days, tentative conversations bloomed with other occupants. A woman from the floor below spoke of recurring whispers, sightings of an anomalous figure drifting through the passageways, though she dismissed them with a weary shrug. Tales woven into the building's very fabric over decades. Another resident, nearer my floor, confided hearing peculiar scratching sounds after dark. He quipped about colossal rodents, a jest delivered with a strained lightness that betrayed deeper unease. The words ghost or entity remained unspoken, hovering like phantoms themselves in the space between words. I offered non-committal nods, feigning imperviousness, but in the nocturnal solitude, rationality began to erode under the relentless drip of fear. I lay awake, eyes fixed on the ceiling's geography, listening, waiting. Sometimes, a subtle vibration hummed through the floorboards, the phantom weight of something immense pacing the hall. My breath would catch, held captive in the listening dark. One night, resolve hardened within me. Enough. Clutching the reassuring heft of a baseball bat kept for defense, I ventured into the hallway. The antiquated light fixtures sputtered, casting a ballet of distorted shadows upon the bruised walls. My own steps were muffled thunder on the threadbare carpet. The corridor felt constricted, the air stagnant, heavy with the exhalations of years untouched by fresh breezes. I traversed its length, probing each recess, each shadowed alcove. Emptiness greeted me. Every apartment door stood sentinel, locked and impassive. Not a whisper disturbed the profound quiet. Turning back towards my own door, a soft click resonated behind me, sharp as a snapped twig. I whirled, bat raised high, confronting only vacant air. My heart hammered against my skull. Retreating backward, eyes scanning the void, I fumbled for my key, slipped inside, and threw the deadbolt, the sound echoing unnaturally loud in the sudden safety. A few nights later, the unease escalated into something visual, more unsettling. Preparing for bed, a flicker of motion snagged my peripheral vision outside the window. 3rd floor. Nothing should be out there. Yet, undeniably, a fleeting shape had traversed the glass, possessed of limbs that seemed disturbingly elongated, unnaturally thin. My throat constricted. Adrenaline surged, hot and sharp. I lunged toward the window, desperate for a clearer view, pressing my face against the cool pane. Below, the street lay deserted, bathed in the sickly orange glow of distant lamps. No ledge, no fire escape. Nothing offered purchase for a climber. Only darkness and the indifferent city. A choked laugh escaped me. A trick of light, fatigued eyes. But the conviction of being observed clung like damp cloth. I yanked the curtains shut, retreating to the edge of my bed, listening. An hour dripped by in silence. Just as sleep's undertow began to pull me under, a violent slam against my front door ripped me back to full, heart-thudding consciousness. It felt visceral, like a fist striking solid wood. Bat in hand once more, I crept forward, bare feet whispering on the hardwood. I strained, listening for any betraying sound from the hallway. Flicking on the living room light, I blinked against the sudden glare. For a long minute, I stood rigid, weapon poised, waiting for a follow-up. The peephole revealed only the familiar, empty corridor. I secured the deadbolt again, leaving a constellation of lights burning as I retreated to the bedroom. Sleep remained elusive that night. This became the rhythm of my existence for the next week. The itinerant footsteps, the abrasive scraping, the occasional, terrifying glimpse of that shape beyond the glass. Always peripheral, never fully revealed, yet each encounter amplified the suffocating dread, the sense of witnessing something fundamentally wrong, something that defied the known architecture of reality. My imagination, despite my best efforts to tether it to logic, ran rampant. Around 2 a.m, one particularly oppressive night, inspiration struck. Documentation. I positioned my phone on a small tripod in the hallway, its lens aimed to capture the expanse. Retreating inside, leaving the door slightly ajar, I settled in the living room, monitoring the feed. Silence stretched for perhaps half an hour before the footsteps returned. Faint, yet imbued with a peculiar dampness, like bare feet padding across the worn carpet. I froze, eyes glued to the phone screen. The corridor appeared unchanged, save for the epileptic flicker of the bulb near the elevator shaft. Then, a subtle warping on the display, a momentary loss of focus. A tenebrous form slid into the frame. Impossibly tall, skeletal thin, its movements jerky, unnatural. No features resolved, only a stark silhouette, before it glided around the far corner and vanished. My muscles seized. A burning tightness constricted my lungs, stealing my breath. Phone clutched tight. I bolted into the hallway. Empty. The recording showed nothing further. That captured fragment sent me spiraling. I replayed it incessantly, scrutinizing the pixels, searching for a rational flaw, a shadow play, a digital artifact. But the shape possessed an undeniable, albeit distorted, human structure. Limbs too long, head canted at an unnatural angle. Logic offered no purchase. The whispered folklore of the building echoed. Spectral visitors, things that shift and change. I had no name for it, only the chilling certainty of its presence and the visceral terror it inspired. When Elias returned from his trip a few days later, I recounted my experiences, showing him the clip. He chuckled initially, then sobered, recognizing the genuine fear etched on my face. He confessed to a similar encounter months prior, waking abruptly to see a towering shadow silhouetted in his bedroom doorway. Assuming an intruder, he'd lunged for the light switch. Illumination revealed only emptiness. His apartment door remained securely locked from within. He'd spent the remainder of the night bathed in artificial light, too unnerved, too embarrassed, to speak of it. Hearing his account, seeing the residual fear clouding his eyes, solidified my own dread. This wasn't merely frayed nerves or an overactive imagination. Something resided here, woven into the very mortar, revealing itself in fleeting, terrifying glimpses. My vigilance intensified. Every internal door was locked before sleep. Delicate strips of tape were affixed across window seams, silent sentinels against tampering. Futile gestures. The footsteps persisted, erratic but undeniable. The scraping sound sometimes returned from the void above. Twice more, the camera snagged that fleeting, distorted shape. Each instance was a jolt, a fresh wave of adrenaline crashing against the shores of my sanity. One evening, I resolved to force a confrontation. I sat in the living room, cloaked in darkness, save for a single low lamp casting long shadows. Bat rested beside me, phone camera premed. Near midnight, the familiar cadence began, slow steps approaching down the hall. My grip tightened on the bat, knuckles white geography. Breath hitched, shallow and rapid. Tension coiled in my shoulders, my neck. My skin felt clammy, cold. Silently, I moved to the door, peering through the fisheye lens. Nothing visible. Yet the footsteps continued, faint but relentlessly methodical. Easing the door open a mere crack, I raised the phone, recording. The hallway light pulsed erratically. A long, attenuated shadow stretched across the opposite wall, cast by an unseen source. Then, the shadow contracted, sliding out of view. Heart pounding a deafening rhythm, I stepped into the corridor, bat in one hand, phone filming in the other. My legs trembled, my mouth was dessert dry. The footsteps seemed to recede, moving toward the rusted elevator cage at the corridor's end, its panel lights dim embers. They stopped. I swept the phone's flashlight beam across the space, searching. Suddenly, a soft, dry friction whispered behind me. I spun, empty. My pulse roared in my ears. Nausea churned low in my gut. Backing away, eyes darting between both ends of the hall, my flashlight beam wavered. Then, a sound like expelled breath, too close, brushing against my ear, devoid of words but intimate with menace. I swung the bat wildly, connecting only with stale air. My breathing dissolved into ragged gasps. Scrambling back into my apartment, I slammed the door, the deadbolt shooting home with a decisive thud. My hands shook uncontrollably. Sleep was a forgotten country for the remainder of the night. A pattern emerged. Every encounter left behind an overwhelming sensation of being watched, toyed with. It felt like a perverse game of hide and seek, orchestrated by something unseen. Never a full revelation, only fragments. A sound, a shadow, a fleeting glimpse. Patience frayed thin. My nerves existed in a perpetual state of high alert. Evenings became dreaded intervals, marked by the setting sun, signaling the potential return of the uncanny sounds, the unsettling presence. Sleep patterns inverted. I courted slumber during daylight hours, keeping vigil through the long nights, seeking refuge in illumination. During a weekend foray, I approached the building manager, an elderly man weathered by years within these walls. He met my hesitant account of strange phenomena with a practiced shrug. Yes, reports had surfaced over the years, he conceded, but nothing concrete had ever emerged. Old buildings, he murmured, have their eccentricities. His disinterest was palpable. He swiftly pivoted the conversation to an upcoming inspection, admonishing me about tidiness. I departed his office suffused with frustration and a chilling sense of isolation. It seemed the building's denizens chose either willful ignorance or weary resignation. That very night, the footsteps returned, bolder now, pacing directly outside my door, back and forth, back and forth. I stood frozen in the living room, phone recording, lights blazing, bat within easy reach on the sofa. My body felt rigid, carved from stone. Breathing was a shallow, conscious effort. The pacing persisted for a full minute, then paused. Abruptly, the doorknob rattled violently. A strangled gasp escaped me. I aimed the phone at the door, sweat tracing cold paths down my back. The rattling ceased. Silence descended, thick and expectant. Cautiously, I approached the door, pressing my ear against the wood. A faint, dry scraping commenced. The sound of fingernails, perhaps, or something sharper, drawn across the timber. My heartbeat thundered. My hand trembled as I held the phone steady. Seconds later, the scraping stopped. I checked the lock again, ensuring its solidity. Then I waited, motionless, for what felt like an eternity. Nothing more. Later, the recording confirmed it all. The measured steps, the frantic rattling, the unnerving scrape. Visually, however, nothing. My hallway camera showed only the empty, flickering corridor. This was the fracture point. My rational mind acknowledged the undeniable reality of the occurrences, yet lacked any tangible proof of a conventional perpetrator, human or animal. I felt ensnared, adrift in a sea of inexplicable events. Was it some spectral residue, or a trespasser possessed of preternatural stealth? Regardless, the constant sense of exposure had become unbearable. Now, each nightfall initiates a ritual of defense, locks secured, flashlight and bat within arm's reach, phone perpetually recording, hoping for definitive evidence, something tangible to present, to demand action. The thought of breaking the lease surfaces, but finances chain me here. Elias, my neighbor across the hall, sometimes checks in. He hears things too, he admits quietly. We exchange strained jokes about our phantom tormentor, a fragile shield against the shared, gnawing unease. The tall, slender shape hasn't materialized outside my window for a week or so, but its potential return hangs heavy in the air. Every creak of the floorboards, every flicker of the lights, draws my muscles taut. Relaxation is a forgotten luxury within these walls. Each noise is an alarm. The nights stretch, elongated by dread, the building itself seeming to absorb the light, growing darker. I don't know the nature of what lurks in these corridors, but its awareness of me is palpable. It isn't departing. The tension escalates with each passing night. Each night the question sharpens. Will this be the night it breaches the threshold? Thus far, its intrusions have been external. Hallway sounds, window apparitions, noises. Dan atto. The door. I wait, suspended in this state of siege, for the inevitable escalation. The moment it decides the barrier is no longer relevant. For now, I persist. Sleep comes in fragmented bursts, often deferred until the relative safety of dawn. The phone remains charged, a constant companion. Tiny bells now adorn my door handle, a low-tech alarm against intrusion. They remain silent, yet the footsteps persist. The scraping from the empty apartment above still echoes intermittently, and sometimes, navigating the hallway, an undeniable certainty prickles my senses. A presence just beyond sight, poised, waiting. Logic has failed me here. I am left confronting a reality that terrifies. Something dwells within this building that defies easy categorization. I don't know what it is, but it knows me. It knows my routines, my fears. It knows how to dismantle my certainty, pixel by pixel. And every night, it resumes its clandestine game in the shadowed corridors, a relentless reminder that some phenomena refuse to be reasoned away. So I wait, armed with inadequate defenses, wood, light, and a locked door, wondering, always wondering, when it will make its next move. The first time the anomaly manifested, a knot tightened deep within my gut, arresting my movements. My gaze snagged on the tall regulator clock by my workbench, 3:33 a.m. A glance around confirmed the impossible. Every timepiece in my atelier, from the grand solemn pendulum clock near the entrance to the cluster of marine chronometers awaiting restoration, stood utterly still. Their hands, like paralyzed limbs, were locked at that precise, unholy minute. The delicate dance of second hands had ceased. I blinked, expecting the illusion to shatter, but the tableau remained static, frozen under the stark overhead illumination. A clammy film bloomed on my brow. I swiped at it with a trembling hand. This wasn't fatigue playing tricks. This was real. Mine is a life measured in fractions of seconds, spent coaxing reluctant mechanisms back to life. I am an artisan of time, mending the fractured rhythms of wristwatches, resuscitating the dormant hearts of heirloom clocks. Clients entrust me with timepieces steeped in memory, relics pulled from dusty attics, stopwatches bearing the weight of sentiment. The quiet hum and rhythmic cadence of my workshop, punctuated by the escapement's delicate beat, has always been my preferred nocturnal companion. That night, immersed in the intricate resurrection of a century-old automaton clock promised for the weekend, I had stepped away for water. Returning, I'd checked the imposing grandfather clock, 3:33. Then, the ornate wall clock, 3:33. Coincidence, perhaps? My eyes darted to the vintage hunter case resting open on my bench. 3:33. The knot in my stomach cinched tighter. Reaching into a drawer, I retrieved a small, reliable digital clock, its screen flaring to life. 3:33. A chill traced its way up my spine. I scanned the room, empty, yet the air felt dense, charged. My own breath sounded ragged in the profound stillness. Placing the digital clock beside me, I tapped its face uselessly. The numerals remained unchanged. I strained my ears, listening for the familiar symphony of ticks, the whir of springs, the subtle hum of the old refrigerator in the corner. Silence, absolute, suffocating silence, as if the very air had congealed. Making a slow rotation, I surveyed my domain. Tools lay scattered across the main bench, minuscule screwdrivers glinting like surgical instruments, tweezers poised, chamois cloths, stray gears like tiny metallic fossils. My stool, my cooling coffee, the open maw of my toolbox, all appeared mundane. Yet the universal halt of time screamed otherwise. A constriction tightened my chest. My mouth turned to dust. I waited, eyes flitting, desperate for any flicker of motion. Then, a disturbance at vision's edge. Near the tall shelves, laden with donor clocks, cannibalized for their precious parts, something undulated. Not a person, nor a conventional shadow thrown by the lamps. It was a patch of mobile darkness, flowing between the dormant timepieces, less a shape than a distortion, like smoke writhing languidly in stagnant air. I was rooted to the spot. My legs felt like lead, yet some morbid curiosity propelled me forward. Was I unraveling? My heart hammered a frantic rhythm against my ribs. Reaching the shelves, I found nothing. The space between the clocks was empty, still. Only a tremor in my hands betrayed the encounter. The air here felt distinctly colder. Turning back, I confirmed the clocks remained prisoners of 3:33. How could every single mechanism, synchronous or quartz, mechanical or digital, fail at the identical instant? Even derelict clocks usually displayed random times. Then came the sound, a susurrus, dry and faint, like hushed voices just beyond comprehension. I spun towards the storeroom door at the workshop's far end. No one. The murmuring persisted, indistinct, maddeningly close. My breathing hitched. Stepping cautiously towards the sound, it swelled slightly, still unintelligible, before abruptly ceasing. Silence rushed back in. The thought of plunging the room into darkness to search felt repellent. I was exposed, cornered. With sudden resolve, I hurried to the front, fumbled with the lock, and burst outside into the pre-dawn chill. The scent of damp asphalt and distant exhaust filled my lungs. I checked my mobile phone. Its screen glowed, 3:34. The discrepancy sent another wave of nausea through me. Inside, time was fractured. Outside, it flowed. Backing away from the entrance, I let the door click shut, my arms shaking. After a minute, gathering frayed nerves, I forced myself back inside. The workshop was alive again. Ticking filled the air, a multi-layered chorus resuming mid-beat. All clocks now read 3:34. A ragged sigh escaped me. Had I hallucinated the entire episode? The lingering visceral dread insisted otherwise. My face felt damp and cool. Sinking onto my stool, I watched the seconds tick by, vigilant until 4 a.m. But the strange congruence did not repeat. Eventually, shaken, I locked up and went home. The following night found me back at my bench, compelled by a mixture of fear and fascination. Would the temporal seizure recur? I focused on a delicate mantle clock, replacing worn pinions, tuning its chime. As 3 a.m. approached, a familiar tension settled in my shoulders. 3:28, 3:29, 3:30. Perspiration beaded on my palms. At 3:31, a sharp, anomalous click emanated from a nearby clock. Its second hand hung motionless at the zenith, and then, like a contagion, the stillness spread, clock by clock. By 3:33, silence reigned once more. Dread washed over me, colder this time, yet threaded with a perverse curiosity. Rising slowly, I circumnavigated the room, reaching out to touch the glass face of a stopped wall clock. Cold metal, inert glass. Tapping it yielded nothing. The whispers began again, this time directly behind me. I whirled. The same umbral form drifted near my workbench, gliding low, featureless, like a sentient pool of shadow clinging to the floorboards, before flowing towards the corner by the door. My heart pounded violently. I pressed back against the wall, the rough texture of the paint grounding me momentarily. The whispers were clearer now, overlapping, rapid, yet distinct phrases pierced the murmur. "Squandered moments," hissed one. "Hours irredeemable," breathed another. My chest constricted painfully. Images flooded my mind. Procrastinated duties. Time bled away on trivialities. Abandoned ambitions. Each memory struck like a physical blow. My vision blurred. Breath came in shallow gasps. The shape drifted nearer, the voices intensifying. "Run!" screamed instinct, but my feet were anchors. Forcing a single shuffling step towards the anomaly, a futile gesture of defiance, my knees buckled. The whispers faltered, as if acknowledging my movement, then resumed their litany of unfinished tasks, neglected projects. My hands shook uncontrollably. No words formed. The shape flickered, then slid across the floor towards the shelves of spare parts, melting behind them. Gradually, like a hesitant tide, the ticking returned. 1 second, then another. The wall clock showed 3:34. This became the rhythm of my nights. Punctually at 3:33, my atelier would plunge into temporal stasis. Staying away proved impossible. An unseen tether pulled me back to witness the phenomenon. A new high-precision digital timer froze with the rest. Attempts to film the event on my phone resulted in recordings that seamlessly jumped from 3:32:59 to 3:34 swags. The intervening minute erased, leaving no trace of the spectral intrusion. Each night, the shadowy figures materialized, sometimes solitary, sometimes several, drifting amongst the silent clocks. Their whispers catalogued my failures, my lapses, my lost opportunities. Occasionally, my name would slither through the murmurs, a chilling hiss that left me drenched in cold sweat, trembling for hours. Coffee fueled my vigils, but did little to steady my hands. One night I tried defiance. Donning headphones, I flooded the workshop with loud music. At 3:33, the sound abruptly died. Silence crashed down. The whispers coiled behind me. I refused to turn, staring fixedly at the disassembled watch movement on my bench, my mind screaming, my skin prickling. After an eternity compressed into a minute, a feather-light touch brushed my shoulder. I jolted from the stool, ripping the headphones off. The shadow pulsed beside me, a void given form. Nausea surged. I stumbled backward, catching myself on the toolbox. Then, the clocks awoke. The ticking resumed, and the presence dissolved. I remained huddled on the floor, gasping for breath. My life warped around this nightly ordeal. Sleep became a fractured daytime necessity. I arrived at the workshop near midnight, increasingly withdrawn. Interactions with clients grew strained. My exhaustion and jumpiness were palpable. My focus fractured, leading to clumsy errors, misaligned hands, over-oiled pivots. One evening, desperate for proof, I resolved to document the event thoroughly. Multiple digital cameras, older models capable of continuous recording, were positioned on tripods aimed at key areas. The main wall clock, the parts shelves, my workbench. I initiated recording around 2:50 a.m. Sitting at my bench, I waited. 3:33 arrived. The world stopped. The low whir of the cameras ceased. Their indicator lights froze. The umbral shapes emerged, gliding with proprietary ease through my domain. The whispers swelled, dissecting my past, quantifying my wasted time. A lump formed in my throat. I kept my gaze locked on one particular form as it flowed across the wall. It seemed to sense my scrutiny, pausing, turning its featureless expanse towards me. I felt pinned by an unseen gaze. My chest tightened. I clenched my fists, wanting to scream, but my throat seized. My mouth worked uselessly. Then, precisely 1 minute later, the clock stirred. The cameras whirred back to life. Reviewing the footage was maddening. Each recording showed me sitting, then an instantaneous jump, then me sitting again, often visibly shaken, but nothing more. No shadows, no whispers, no stopped clocks. Digital evidence proclaimed my sanity while my senses screamed otherwise. I experimented futilely. Different light spectra, rearranging the clocks, setting preemptive alarms. Nothing deterred the inevitable pause, the arrival of the shades. They whispered of time squandered, moments forgotten, opportunities lost. They never caused physical harm, yet their presence eroded my composure, leaving me perpetually unnerved. One night, a new phrase emerged from the susurrus. We observe, we wait. The words sent an icy current through me. My palms grew slick. A new layer of anxiety settled. What were they waiting for? But their behavior remained unchanged. They whispered, drifted, and vanished as 3:34 dawned. Now I endure. The workshop remains my sanctuary and my cell. Leaving feels like surrender, abandoning my craft, my identity. So I stay, night after night, facing the temporal anomaly. I've grown accustomed to the pattern, though not to the fear. Each time the whispers begin, my heart hammers against my ribs. Sometimes I fight the urge to squeeze my eyes shut until it passes, but more often I watch them, searching their shifting forms for a clue, a hint of explanation that never comes. I accept it now, this nightly punctuation mark in my existence. 3:33 a.m. Time halts, the shades appear. They murmur truths about my past, about the irretrievable currency of minutes and hours carelessly spent. Ignoring them draws them closer. Watching them keeps them at bay. Then 3:34 arrives, they dissipate, and I am left alone with the suddenly clamorous ticking of innumerable clocks. This is my story, lived and relived nightly. I continue my work, restoring time for others while haunted by my own fractured minutes. I don't know why this happens, or if it will ever cease. I only know that each night as the appointed moment approaches, I hold my breath, steady my hands as best I can, and wait for the shadows to remind me of all the time that slipped away. Unrecoverable, irretrievable. Then time restarts, and I work on, caught in the relentless ticking present. That Monday, under a sky the color of slate, Elias materialized before the derelict convent. Its facade bore the scars of time, paint fissured like drought-stricken earth, timbers warped beneath protesting floorboards. The air inside, thick and sepulchral, tasted of damp stone and forgotten prayers. His truck, laden with the implements of transformation, waited curbside. Time was a tightening knot. This husk needed rebirth as his atelier before the month bled out. A simple renovation, he'd thought. Patch the wounds, bestow a skin of fresh paint, carve out a space for creation. Nothing more. His initial survey was a measured procession through corridors vast enough to swallow sound whole. Legacy of its former life, the convent boasted ceilings that vaulted into shadow, walls dense as secrets, and diminutive chambers, nuns' cells, stark and penitent. Light filtered weakly through slit windows, slicing the gloom but never truly conquering it. A profound stillness reigned, broken only by the percussion of his own boots on the worn flagstones. Yet the echoes played tricks, lingering a phantom beat after he halted, a ghostly mimicry that feathered his spine with disquiet. Just the acoustics of age, he rationalized, the way hollow spaces hold on to sound. Work began with the abrasive rasp of sandpaper against plaster. Mounted on a stepladder, Elias wrestled with layers of bygone paint, the air growing thick with disturbed dust that caught in his throat. Each stroke yielded a faint, unsettling susurrus, like fingernails dragged across slate, dismissed as the complaints of ancient plaster. Then, after an hour's toil, near the ceiling's embrace, peculiar markings emerged from beneath the pallor. Not mere graffiti, but something deliberate. He angled his flashlight beam against the weak overhead glare. Rows of dark, inked characters swam into view. Fragmented phrases, perhaps, or ciphers. They resisted immediate comprehension. Beneath each cluster, a name, A signature almost effaced by time. Relics of later inhabitants, he surmised, leaving their cryptic marks on consecrated walls. He sanded with renewed purpose, grinding the enigmatic script into near oblivion. Then came the primer, viscous and white, applied with meticulous strokes, a blanketing shroud. As the final inch yielded, a shiver traced his vertebrae, unrelated to the drafts snaking through wall fissures. Fatigue gnawed at his shoulders, his arms burned. He extinguished the lights, the heavy lock tumbling shut with resonant finality, and retreated into the mundane embrace of his vehicle. Dawn found him back, coffee a meager shield against lingering weariness. He stepped into the main corridor, yawn heavy on his breath, and froze. Where pristine primer had reigned, the script now flourished anew. Not faded remnants, but bold inscriptions, darker, sharper, as if inked moments before. The signatures, too, resurrected, varied hands asserting their spectral presence. Confusion warred with disbelief. He'd obliterated that section. Such bleed-through defied logic, defied the thick coat he'd applied. He approached, extended a hesitant hand. The paint felt cool, utterly cured. He traced the letters. No smudge, no transfer. Fresh ink, impossibly embedded. A knot tightened low in his gut. A chemical anomaly, he desperately reasoned. Some bizarre reaction with the substrate. He would simply entomb it again. A second coat, thicker still, consumed his morning, a determined act of erasure. By afternoon, the wall stood immaculate once more. He breathed out, a ragged sigh of forced relief, pushing back the tendrils of unease that curled at the edges of his mind. Day 3 dawned with grim predictability. The script was back, defiant. New signatures joined the ghostly roster, and the phrases themselves seemed to coalesce, hinting at substance. Passages. Beneath. One line whispered, another declared, "The halls carry shadows." Nausea churned. A muttered curse escaped him as his fingers confirmed the impossible. Dry paint, vivid text. Suddenly, an icy current caressed the back of his neck. He whirled, eyes scanning for an open door, a compromised window. Nothing. All remained sealed. His heart hammered against his ribs. His palms grew slick. The urge to flee warred with the chains of contract. There had to be a rational cause. Faulty materials, perhaps? He sought refuge in the courtyard, a small, high-walled enclosure starved of sun. Tracing the chill, cracked stones, he heard it. The soft scuff of footsteps directly behind him, furtive, hesitant. He spun. Emptiness greeted him, the sound dissolving the instant he turned. The fine hairs on his arms prickled, his pulse throbbed violently. The city's distant hum felt worlds away. Here, within these ancient stones, silence pressed down like a physical weight. A pocket universe sealed against the ordinary. He forced numb limbs back to the task, retreating to a secondary corridor. The industrial sander howled, raising choking clouds of plaster dust. As the haze settled, faint outlines emerged along the plaster's edge. More script, kin to the first. A smudged signature resolved into something like Brother Cassian. He attacked it with thinner-soaked rags. The ink ghosted, only to bloom again seconds later, seemingly weeping from the very substance of the wall. Vertigo threatened. He leaned against the vibrating machine, gulping air. That evening, desperation dictated a new tactic, a potent chemical sealant. Its acrid fumes filled the space, stinging his eyes despite the mask and open windows. As he brushed the viscous liquid on, The underlying script seemed to shimmer, to pulse with a faint, resistant light. Locking the heavy doors behind him felt less like securing the building and more like sealing a tomb. The drive home was haunted by the phantom image of characters burning through every layer he applied, a persistent, mocking script. He felt absurdly rattled, yet the tremor in his hands was undeniable. The fourth dawn brought a palpable chill. Stepping inside was like plunging into winter. His breath plumed before him, the air easily 10 degrees colder than the street. He strode to the sealed corridor, dread a cold stone in his gut. It was there, crisp, indelible. Worse, the paint around the script seemed to weep, forming slow, viscous rivulets that traced the letters like tears. Yet when he touched them, his fingers came away dry. The illusion of moisture persisted, the drips crawling with glacial slowness. His hands began to shake, his heart a frantic drum against his ribs. His throat constricted. Backing away, he collided with a shelf. Tools rained onto the flagstones with a jarring clang. Then, the footsteps returned, closer now, echoing from the adjacent hall, light, almost ethereal. He moved towards the sound, knees weak beneath him, peering around corners into empty space. The instant he drew near, silence fell. "Is anyone there?" His voice, unnaturally loud, was swallowed by the stillness. No answer. Behind him, a hinge groaned. He spun, finding only a closed, impassive door. Panic clawed its way up his throat. Sweat beaded on his skin despite the cold. A methodical search seemed the only recourse. He forced himself through each cell-like room, flinging doors open onto dust and emptiness, stacked furniture shrouded like corpses. But the writing was everywhere now, lurking in corners, behind decaying shelves, even scrawled near the baseboards. Touching a line near the floor sent a tingling jolt up his arm, like static charge. Gooseflesh prickled his skin. The messages grew bolder, more specific. Hidden corridor. Below the chapel. Under the flagstones. Open at dusk. Each discovery tightened the knot of fear in his stomach. Later, sweeping debris in the cavernous former chapel, sunlight shafting weakly through tall, grimy windows. He heard it. A soft, grating scrape from behind the stone altar. His flashlight beam found a hairline fracture snaking across a floor slab, suggesting disturbance. Kneeling, he pushed, but the stone held fast. The scraping persisted, a sound of friction from beneath the floor. His light flickered, his pulse hammered in his ears. Then, an unmistakable wave of frigid air washed over the back of his neck. He recoiled, flashlight beam trembling, whipping around to confront. Nothing. The scraping ceased. He scrambled to his feet, dizzy, hands unsteady, chest painfully tight. Logic offered no anchor. Escape beckoned, yet the imperative to finish, the demands of his livelihood, held him captive. He wouldn't speak of this, couldn't. He poured his fraying nerves into mundane labor, driving nails, tightening hinges, replacing dead fixtures. Yet the feeling persisted. Unseen eyes tracked his every move. Each turn revealed only vacant, shadowed corridors. His chest remained tight, breath shallow. Sweat slicked his back despite the chill. The clang of his hammer seemed to hang in the air too long, each echo a mocking retort. As dusk began to bleed through the high windows, he felt compelled to check the main corridor one last time. The primer wept anew, thin lines tracing fresh pronouncements. "It waits below," and more chillingly, "Do not stay after dark." His flashlight beam quivered on the words, hands trembling. A low ache pulsed in his gut. The footsteps sounded again, impossibly close behind him. He spun, heart leaping. Emptiness. His palms were slick, muscles coiled tight. Then, a whisper, soft as dust motes dancing in the gloom, seemed to emanate from the walls themselves. A chorus of faint, indistinct voices. Pressing his ear to the cold plaster, he felt it. A low vibration, something stirring within. He jerked back, head swimming. No proof, nothing tangible, yet the certainty of being observed was absolute. Darkness was falling fast. The overhead lights flickered ominously. Adrenaline surged. He scrambled, gathering tools with frantic haste, slamming switches off. The heavy front door locked. He tested the handle. Once, twice, 3 times. Out on the deserted street, the silence amplified the phantom footsteps still echoing in his skull. A profound chill settled deep in his bones, impervious to the night air. Tension locked his shoulders, twisted his spine. He stood for a moment, gazing up at the convent's looming dark silhouette, its windows like vacant eyes staring into the void. Walls that bled script, footsteps born of silence. It defied reason, yet it was undeniably real. Tomorrow. He had to return tomorrow. Different primer, perhaps strip the plaster to the lath, whatever it took to silence those words. Who wrote them? How? He didn't know. He only knew the encroaching dark amplified the disquiet, solidified the presence. Something was here, watching. His hands shook so violently, fumbling for the keys, that they clattered twice on the pavement. The engine finally caught. As he pulled away, a glance in the rearview mirror snagged on an upstairs window. A flicker of movement. No, a shape, dark, motionless, observing. He blinked and it vanished. His hands tightened, cold on the wheel. He drove into the night, the convent receding behind him, knowing sleep would offer no escape, only replays. Tomorrow awaited, with its silent whispers and weeping walls. The hospital released me into the deep velvet of post-midnight, a husk drained of energy, yearning for collapse. Charleston slumbered miles behind. Ahead lay the unlit artery of highway, stretching towards the quiet outskirts where I lived, a ribbon of asphalt threading through profound emptiness. This isolation, usually a comfort, felt different tonight, charged with an unseen current. Settling into the worn driver's seat, the click of the buckle echoed in the capsule of the car. Ignition turned, the engine murmured to life, a solitary hum against the radio's faint, crackling breath. Headlamps sliced a path through the oppressive dark. The world beyond their reach swallowed whole. Weariness clung like damp wool, a physical weight I tried to shrug off as my gaze fixed on the unfolding road. Perhaps 10 minutes dissolved into the journey before twin points of light bloomed in the rearview mirror. Insignificant at first, merely another traveler navigating the late hour. Yet they lingered, grew. The distance between us shrank with unnerving persistence, the beams intensifying until they burned, a fierce, almost accusatory glare that bleached the mirror. Annoyance flickered, swiftly overtaken by a colder tendril of unease. This empty expanse offered no cause for such aggressive proximity. A gentle tap on the brakes, a silent plea for space, was met not with retreat, but with a harsh, retaliatory flash of high beams. My grip tightened on the wheel, knuckles white, the steady thrum of my pulse accelerating into a frantic beat. The vehicle itself remained a shapeless void behind the blinding lights. "Be calm," I commanded myself, Focus? Impatience? Lost? Rationalizations felt thin against the mounting certainty. They were not passing, they were shadowing. A calculated breath, an attempt to steady trembling hands. The fuel gauge showed half a tank, ample reserve. Just keep driving, logic insisted. They'll veer off eventually. But the unwavering closeness, the sheer tenacity of their pursuit, scraped against my nerves like fingernails on slate. Miles bled away under their relentless gaze. Then, impulse. A sharp turn onto a narrow feeder road, barely more than an access lane to a derelict service station. A test, if they followed me here, onto this obscure path. My heart hammered against my ribs as I swung the car onto the cracked pavement. Watching the mirror, I saw their lights hesitate, dip, then curve obediently in my wake. A knot of ice solidified in my stomach. Not coincidence, pursuit. Forehead damp with cold sweat, I navigated into the service station's deserted lot, pulling beneath the sputtering halo of one of its few surviving lamps. Engine cut, silence rushed in, amplifying the frantic pounding in my ears. I watched the entrance, a fragile hope flickering. Perhaps they'd given up. The hope died as a dark sedan ghosted into the lot, engine a low growl, extinguishing its headlights as it rolled to a stop several spaces away. A silent, waiting presence. I strained to pierce the deeply tinted windows, but they offered back only reflections of the bleak surroundings. It just sat there, idling, expectant. Trapped. Options scrambled through my mind, each less appealing than the last. Confrontation felt suicidal. Calling someone? At this hour, stranded miles from anywhere? The doors remained locked, my fingers clamped onto the steering wheel, eyes fixed on the inert shape of the other car. Time warped, stretching seconds into agonizing minutes. My phone felt heavy in my hand. 911? What report could I make? A car was parked. They hadn't threatened, hadn't moved. Yet the stillness itself felt menacing, deliberate. The tension became unbearable. With hands that shook, I twisted the key. The engine roared back to life, shattering the quiet. I eased out of the parking space, turning back towards the highway, a prayer forming on my lips that they would stay put. It went unanswered. The instant my tires hit the main road, the twin suns flared to life behind me. Closer now, searingly bright, practically fused to my bumper. Panic, sharp and suffocating, clawed its way up my throat. Their motive remained terrifyingly obscure, but the imperative was clear. Escape. The accelerator met the floor. Speed climbed, the landscape blurring outside the cone of my headlights. My eyes darted between the road ahead and the blinding glare consuming the rearview mirror. Faster, faster, but they matched me. An inescapable shadow glued to my tail. Another turn, desperate now, onto a twisting back road, hoping the curves might grant me an advantage, shake them loose. They mirrored every maneuver, hugging each bend with unnerving familiarity, as if they knew this labyrinth better than I. Sweat slicked my palms. Breath came in ragged, shallow bursts. The darkness outside felt immense, pressing in, while those relentless lights burned into my retinas. Ahead, almost hidden, a dirt track branched off, little more than a scar leading into the woods. Without conscious thought, I wrenched the wheel, tires spitting gravel, as the car lurched onto the uneven ground, deeper into the trees, deeper into shadow. For one blessed moment, the pursuing lights vanished from the mirror. Relief washed over me. fragile and fleeting. Then they reappeared, closer than ever, as if the track itself had been their intended destination. Fear became a physical wave crashing over me. These were my woods, yet this trail was unknown territory. Where did it lead? Did it offer escape, or merely a deeper trap? I drove onward, propelled by sheer terror, focused only on the receding path behind me. Suddenly, abruptly, the track ceased. Brakes slammed. The car skidded, halting in a small earthen clearing that's hemmed in by dense trees. Dead end. No way forward. Just dirt, silence, and the suffocating woods. Engine off. Listening. Every nerve screamed. Their headlights remained, fixed at the clearing's edge, illuminating the skeletal trees, painting long dancing shadows. The car itself was now visible, dark, sleek, radiating a silent menace. I held my breath, waiting for a door to open, a figure to emerge. Nothing. They simply watched. Run into that impenetrable blackness. Stay, a target in a cage. Slowly, glacially, their car began to creep forward, inching across the clearing, closing the gap. The finality of it spurred me to action. Breath held, key turned, engine catching. Reverse gear shrieked as tires clawed at the loose earth. I spun the wheel, swerving wildly around their advancing form, then slammed the gear shift forward, flooring the accelerator. Back down the treacherous track, a frantic retreat, not daring a backward glance, but hearing the roar of their engine ignite behind me, the sound of tires churning dirt, the sound of relentless pursuit. The car bucked and fishtailed on the narrow trail, demanding every ounce of concentration to keep from crashing. White-knuckled, eyes glued to the path illuminated by my frantic headlights, I pushed the engine to its limit. Each bump, each curve was a gamble. Still, their lights burned in the mirror, an unblinking eye impossibly close. Then, the main road appeared like salvation. I burst onto the asphalt without slowing, velocity my only shield, driven by the primal need for distance. The pursuing headlights stayed with me for another mile, a constant, terrifying presence. Then, as suddenly as they had first appeared, they winked out, gone. I didn't slow, didn't stop to question, just drove, the adrenaline a raging fire in my veins, until the familiar silhouette of my own house emerged from the darkness. I killed the engine in the driveway, sitting enveloped by the sudden silence, the echo of my heart pounding in my ears. Tremors racked my body as I tried to piece together the night's terror. A reflexive glance into the rearview mirror froze the blood in my veins. There, lying innocuously on the back seat, was a folded piece of paper. A note. Unfolding it with numb fingers, I read the message, scrawled in a shaky, unfamiliar hand. See you soon. The car door flew open. I scrambled out, stumbling towards the house, fumbling with the keys, slamming and locking the door behind me. The police came, listened, searched, found nothing. No trace of the dark sedan, no clue to the identity of its driver or the author of that chilling promise. Weeks have bled into one another since that night. The overt pursuit has not resumed, but the fear remains, a cold ember glowing beneath the surface. Every time I slide behind the wheel, before turning the key, my eyes instinctively flick to the back seat, my heart seizing, forever scanning the darkness behind me, dreading the inevitable return of those twin, burning lights. That crate of detritus at the market. I should have averted my gaze, passed it by, but the October sun, low and sharp, struck glancing fire off the brittle plastic cases, arresting my steps. A siren song of forgotten things. Now, sleep is a forgotten country. My fingers tremble at the ghost sound of static. Every shadow stretches, elongates, threatening to coalesce into a watching figure just beyond my peripheral vision. Let me recount the precise unraveling. It began last Saturday, one of those crystalline autumn mornings, the air so crisp it felt like breathing finely ground glass. I was adrift in the Winston Street Bazaar, that sprawling weekend congress of cast-offs and curiosities, seeking nothing, merely sifting through the sediment of other lives. Beneath a rickety folding table, nestled in corrugated cardboard, lay the cassettes. 30 or so spools, anonymous save for small adhesive labels scrawled with dates in ink faded to the blue of old veins. $5 for the lot, demanded the woman presiding over the stall, a figure seemingly woven from dust and twilight, her eyes lost in shadow. From an estate clearance, she'd rasped, knowing nothing more. An impulse purchase, fueled by the memory of my father's archaic Sony player tucked away somewhere. The tapes lay forgotten until the encroaching night. Rummaging through a closet's archaeology, I unearthed the Walkman. A test seemed appropriate. Dead batteries yielded to fresh ones. I selected the topmost cassette, labeled 61582, slid it home, thumbed the play mechanism. Silence first, pregnant with the low hiss of aged magnetic tape. Then, a man's voice surfaced, measured and distinct, the cadence of a solitary lecture. He spoke of banalities, the caprice of the weather, the contents of his midday meal, musings on some forgotten novel, auditory diary entries, unremarkable. My thumb hovered over fast forward when it happened, a thread of sound woven beneath his monologue, almost subliminal, a sibilant breath forming my name. Ethan. Stop, rewind, play. There, undeniable, cutting through the decades and the decay. Ethan. A clammy sweat bloomed on my palms. Coincidence, I reasoned frantically. An overheard name, captured accidentally in the ambient noise of the original recording. I snatched another spool. 9382. A woman's voice this time, reciting verse, a melancholy lilt. And again, insidious, a different timbre, but the same impossible utterance. Ethan. And again, Ethan. 5 more cassettes I devoured that night, each a distinct sonic landscape. Mundane chatter, literary readings, fragments of dialogue. Within every single one, like flaws in glass, lurked the whispers. My name breathed into the pauses, nestled in the background hum. Sometimes singular, sometimes a chilling echo. Inflections varied, anger, supplication. One instance was punctuated by a cold, soft laugh. Ethan. Sleep became an impossibility. I lay staring into the darkness, grappling with the sheer wrongness of it. Recordings from 1982. My own arrival, dated 1990. How could these disembodied voices, trapped on magnetic tape 8 years before my birth, know my name? Sunday dawned grey. I drove, compelled, back to the flea market. The space where the crone's stall had stood was vacant, unremarkable pavement. Inquiries yielded blank stares, shrugs. One grizzled vendor swore that particular patch had remained untenanted for weeks, despite my vivid memory of the transaction mere hours before. Returning to the sterile quiet of my apartment, I began a meticulous cataloguing. Headphones clamped tight, I logged each tape, noting the precise temporal coordinates of every whisper. Patterns swam into focus. The intrusions never overlapped the primary speaker. They exploited the natural silences, the ambient noise. Their frequency escalated with the chronology of the dates. The first tape held but 2 instances. The final one I examined that night yielded 12. The voices themselves were a diverse chorus, yet unified in their perfect pronunciation. Ethan, not the flattened vowel some employed, and sometimes additions. Ethan, listen. Ethan, help. Ethan, it's time. An afternoon call to my parents, feigning casual curiosity. Had they frequented Winston Street before my time? Known any avid audio diarists in the early 80s? Negatives on all counts. I cross-referenced the dates online. Nothing. No correlating tragedies, no public events, no thread to bind these disparate recordings. That night, drawn by a morbid gravity, I selected the cassette dated 12/4/2482, Christmas Eve. The recording captured the warm clatter of a family gathering, cutlery against china, bursts of laughter, muffled carols bleeding in from another room. The whispers began as before. Ethan. Ethan. Then, precisely 42 minutes in, a sudden, jarring cessation. The familial sounds, the music, everything, sheared off mid-syllable. Into this vacuum of absolute silence, a confluence of whispers arose, speaking in unison. Ethan, we've been waiting for you. The tape hissed on, empty but for sporadic bursts of static. As I reached to stop it, new voices emerged. Not whispers now, but clear, conversational tones. Is he attuned yet? Yes, the spools are with him. All of them? Not the terminus, not yet. Good. Premature. When? Soon, he will recognize the moment. Then, chillingly, they began to describe me. My apartment's layout, the specific clothes I wore at that exact moment, the half-finished mug of cold coffee beside me, the worn patch on the rug by my bed, details sealed within my private space, impossible knowledge. I tore the headphones away, the plastic slick in my trembling grip. The Walkman slipped, impacting the floor with a sharp crack. The battery cover sprang open, spilling the cells like metallic seeds. No more tapes have played since. They reside in their cardboard tomb within my closet. Disposal feels impossible, yet listening invites a terror I can barely comprehend. Especially the final one, dated 12/31/82. It deviates. Its casing is opaque, obsidian black, unlike the other's transparency. The label isn't handwritten, it's typed, stark and impersonal, and it alone radiates a faint, persistent warmth, as if perpetually basking in an unseen sun, despite days spent in the cool dark. Sometimes, in the dead hours, I think I hear them, susurrus leaking from the closet door. My name, a mantra, interwoven with other syllables I can't quite decipher. Yesterday, returning from the numb routine of work, I found the Walkman placed precisely on my bed. Loaded within it, the black cassette, and I know I left both secured in the closet. I know my apartment door was locked. Sleep is a phantom limb. I occupy the living room now, bathed in the artificial glare of every light, my gaze fixed on the closet door. The whispers intensify, untethered now from the magnetic medium. An hour ago, my phone shrilled. Answering, I was met with a wash of static, then the familiar clear voices from the Christmas Eve tape. "It's time, Ethan. Play the last one." I commit this account because someone must know what occurred, what continues to unfold. The black tape sits on my desk now, a locus of dread. 40 years. The whispers claim they've waited, that I alone am the receiver, that they require my assistance, that they hunger. My hands shake, blurring the keys. The whispers are no longer peripheral. They are present, immediate, articulating desires, instructions. The black cassette pulses, its warmth becoming a palpable heat across the room. Every instinct screams against it. A primal refusal wells within me. Yet I will play it. God forgive me, I will play it. The not knowing is its own form of destruction. I must understand, even if understanding obliterates me. I can sense their excitement now, a gathering storm. They perceive my resolve. The final tape is heavy in my hand, throbbing like a captured heart. I will document what follows. 11:42 p.m. Cassette engaged. My finger trembles above the play button. 11:43 p.m. Their voices are thunderous in my mind. "Do it, Ethan. Release us." 11:44 p.m. The black plastic sears my fingertips. 11:45 p.m. A heavy knocking commences at my apartment door. 11:46 p.m. The whispers cease abruptly. Utter silence descends. 11:47 p.m. The knocking intensifies, frantic. I think I hear voices. My name, called from the hallway. 11:48 p.m. My phone rings. Caller ID, unknown. 11:49 p.m. Every electronic device flares to life simultaneously. Screens erupt in roaring static. 11:50 p.m. The power dies. Darkness absolute. Typing by the phone's dying light. 11:51 p.m. The knocking has stopped. All sound has stopped. 11:52 p.m. I am pressing play now. If this is found, I am likely. The remainder of the document consists of an unreadable torrent of glyphs, symbols, and corrupted characters, terminating in a single clear line of text. "We are free. Thank you, Ethan." That deviation, that single turn off the known path, it haunts the quiet hours. Here, in the sterile dimness where they tell me convalescence happens, I wrestle with the memory. They suggest ink on paper might exorcise it. So, I bleed the recollection, drop by agonizing drop, exactly as the night unfurled. Returning from Chicago's steel embrace, Pittsburgh still a 6-hour promise on the navigator's screen. Then, near midnight, the interstate choked. Brake lights flared ahead, a sudden thrombosis on I-80. A uniformed figure, silhouetted against flashing amber, gestured us onto a county road exit. Obediently, I veered off, trailing the car ahead. Or so I thought. Moments later, the rearview mirror showed only receding taillights, and ahead, nothing but asphalt ribboning into blackness. This artery pulsed through skeletal corn, fields flanking me like silent, rustling armies under the late October moon. My beams sliced the dark, illuminating brittle stalks, long dead. 11:42 blinked accusingly from the dash. An hour dissolved into the void, marked only by the engine's thrum. No other travelers shared this isolation. No porch lights pierced the gloom. Radio hissed static defiance. My phone, a useless brick, no bars. Fuel gauge hovered near half. Ample reserve, I reasoned, to regain the highway's familiar flow. Then, a relic materialized from the night. A derelict fueling station. Pumps like rusted sentinels. Windows gap-toothed sockets. A faded insignia. Gulf, hanging askew. Beside it, a mile marker, 237. The number resonated oddly, the same as my Chicago hotel room. Perhaps 20 minutes spun away, then, impossibly, the scene repeated. Decrepit pumps, shattered glass, the tilted Gulf sign, stubbornly defiant, and the mile marker, 237. A tremor ran through me. Impossible, I murmured, the words swallowed by the car's confines. The clock declared 12:47 a.m. I pressed onward, the road an unwavering line through infinity. Cornfields marched past, unchanging. No turnoffs beckoned, no crossroads offered escape. Only the relentless forward trajectory into darkness, mirrored by the receding black behind. 1:23 a.m., it reappeared, the gas station, mile marker 237. The sign groaned faintly, a metallic sigh on the wind. My knuckles whitened on the wheel. Fatigue wasn't the culprit. My senses were razor sharp. This defied logic, defied physics. The road was playing tricks. Panic flared. I buried the accelerator. 70, 80 mm. The corn became a streaking, indistinct wall. I watched the clock, counted seconds morphing into minutes. 17 minutes precisely. There it stood. Again. Mile marker 237. No! The exclamation ripped from my throat as I slammed the brakes, tires screaming protest, halting violently mid-lane. The engine idled, a frantic pulse in the sudden stillness. Wind whispered through the dead corn. My phone remained stubbornly inert. Reversing course seemed the only option. I spun the car around, gravel crunching under the tires, back the way I came. 20 minutes later, framed in my headlights, the station. Mile marker 237. A cold fist clenched around my heart. Sweat slicked my spine despite the autumn chill. Rationality warred with the undeniable. Roads don't coil like serpents. There had to be unseen forks, hidden curves swallowed by the night. From the glove box, I retrieved a notepad, a pen. Data might anchor me. Time, landmarks, anything. My log became a testament to insanity. 2:15 a.m., station passed, telephone poles noted, roughly uniform spacing. 2:32 a.m., station, pole count consistent. 2:49 a.m., station, Gulf signs metallic groan seems louder. 3:06 m, station, detail emerges, a shattered Coca-Cola machine near the boarded entrance. 3:23 a.m., station, the Coke machine stands sentinel. The needle on the fuel gauge dipped ominously toward a quarter, maybe 3 hours left in the tank, trapping me in this Sisyphean drive. My throat was sandpaper. Thought required stillness. I eased onto the gravel verge, silencing the engine. Absolute darkness slammed against the glass. The world outside reduced to the wind's sibilant passage through the corn. A flicker in the side mirror. A shadow deeper than the surrounding night. My head snapped back. The rear window revealed only emptiness. Tap, tap, tap. The sound, sharp against the glass, jolted me violently. A face materialized at my window. Ancient, etched with lines like a drought-cracked riverbed. Eyes sunk deep in shadow. Silver stubble catching the faint interior light. A heavy plaid jacket against the chill. His breath misted the window pane. My finger, trembling, found the switch. The glass descended a fraction. "This ain't your road," he rasped, voice gravelly, unused. "I'm lost," I managed, voice tight. Trying to find I-80, took a detour. He shook his head slowly, emphatically. No detour sign tonight, son. Interstate's been running clear. But the construction, I insisted. The officer. Ain't been a state boy patrol this stretch in 20 years. He leaned nearer, his gaze unnervingly intense. You gotta get out of here, right now. I can't! The words were frantic. The road, it just circles back. I keep passing that gas station. A strange stillness settled on his features. That place, burned to the ground back in '83, ain't nothing left now but cinders and memory. Ice traced its way down my spine. My eyes shot towards the structure illuminated by my headlights. The broken windows, the crooked sign, undeniably solid. I blinked, looked back to the window. Empty air. He was gone, vanished into the whispering corn. Primal fear took hold. I twisted the key, the engine roaring unwillingly back to life. I stomped the accelerator, tires spitting gravel before finding purchase. Direction ceased to matter. Escape was the only imperative. Yet the loop held fast. The station materialized, again and again. The Gulf sign's groan became a mocking farewell. Mile marker 237, a recurring tombstone, until finally the fuel gauge hit E. The engine sputtered, choked, and fell silent. I coasted to a dead stop on the shoulder, enveloped once more by the profound quiet, punctuated only by the wind's lament through the stalks and the unsettling rustle of unseen movement within them. Tap, tap, tap. I didn't turn. I knew who stood sentinel beside my car. Final call, Silas's voice permeated the glass. Time to leave this place. How? The word fractured, brittle with desperation. This road is a Mobius strip. The road ain't the thing turning back on itself. He gestured vaguely towards my chest. It's you, son. You're the one caught in the cycle. I don't understand. Search your memory, not the detour, before that. How did you truly arrive on this stretch? I squeezed my eyes shut, pushing past the fabricated memory of flashing lights and waving troopers. Darkness, then blinding light, headlights searing my vision, bearing down, occupying my entire lane. The horrifying shriek of metal on metal, the world tilting, the sickening crunch as the guardrail rushed up. I opened my eyes. Silas watched, his expression somber. An accident, I breathed, the realization hitting with physical force. He nodded slowly. Nasty one. Tangled your car around a barrier like tinfoil. You've been lying in a hospital bed, lost to the world, for 3 weeks. So I'm dead? Not yet, hovering, but linger here. He swept a hand towards the rustling darkness beyond the road. This place holds tight to souls ain't ready to cross over, or ain't ready to go back. Drive this circle long enough, the world outside fades. You'll forget everything but the road, the station, the corn. Just another whisper on the wind. And then I saw them. Not clearly, but as disturbances in the night. Figures moving with listless repetition amongst the corn stalks. Phantoms pacing their own invisible loops. Lost. How do I break free? My voice was steadier now. Same way you entered, Silas said, pointing back down the asphalt ribbon I'd traveled countless times. Only this time, when the light comes, you don't flinch, don't swerve. Miraculously, impossibly, the engine turned over at the twist of the key, humming smoothly despite the empty tank. "Thank you," I whispered, the words inadequate. Silas stepped back. "Farewell, Elias. May our paths not cross here again." I put the car in drive. One final passage. The derelict station loomed, mile marker 237 gleaming like a final warning. The Gulf sign offered its mournful creak. Then, ahead, not headlights this time, but an encompassing, brilliant radiance flooded the windshield, threatening to consume everything. I held the wheel steady. I drove into the light. Consciousness returned like surfacing from immense depths, heralded by the rhythmic beeping of machines and the antiseptic scent of a hospital room. "A miracle," the physicians murmured, baffled by my recovery. My tale of the looping road, the phantom station, the spectral guide named Silas, dismissed as neurological phantoms, the brain's confused narrative during trauma. Coma dreams, yet the chill remains. There are nights the wind outside my window seems to carry the dry rustle of corn, moments when shadows in peripheral vision seem too substantial. The echo of mile marker 237 resonates, a discordant note in the symphony of my survival. Detours are now anathema. I cling to the charted course. Perhaps I am fortunate. But the image of Silas, forever patrolling that desolate stretch, persists. The thought of those other figures, trapped in their eternal circuits within the corn, haunts the edges of sleep. Does that Gulf sign still hang crooked somewhere in the twilight between worlds, creaking its lonely vigil, waiting for the next soul adrift? I push the thoughts away. Certain highways are best avoided, certain truths too unsettling to dwell upon. Gratitude for my return is the dominant feeling, most days. But sometimes, driving solo under a vast night sky, when the radio dissolves into static, a primal instinct makes me check the rear view. Again and again, ensuring the landmarks recede as they should. Confirming my trajectory remains linear, not circular. Just ensuring, with a certainty I no longer possess, that I am truly home.